After Columbus, the island was in Spanish hands and was named Santo Domingo in honor of the Catholic priest Santo Domingo de Guzman, and the inhabitants were called Dominicans. The island became a refueling station for the gold galleons coming from the continent, but by the 17th century, French pirates had settled in the northwest, and the Spanish didn't like that because they were raiding these galleons. In 1697, Spain...
Let's stop right there. So you see, they always start with the Treaty of Ryswick in 1697, and they never mention the devastations of Osorio, 1605 to 1606, when the Western Third was depopulated. Now, the Dominican people are amalgamation of first contact interactions, right? The Spanish, uh, the native Taino, and the Africans that the Spanish had imported, right, together gave rise to the Dominican people.
Spain let France have a small share of the island, and 80 years later even divided the island among them. So by the end of the 18th century, it was now called Saint-Domingue and Santo Domingo.
Now, this is when the island's history is split into two, or already split into two, in the early 1700s, right? Just to go back, 1625 is when the French arrived on the Western Third, right? This was much after the Spanish depopulated the Western Third of the island. So this will be the history when the history of the Haitian people began, but they will not be imported into the island until the 18th century. As by the end of the 17th century, the French would abandon indigo and tobacco growing for the sugar plantation model. Now, keep in mind, during this period, the Spanish side didn't have the plantation model anymore, as that was abandoned by the end of the 16th century for cattle ranching, contraband, and trade.
The inhabitants, the Dominicans and French settlers, lived for the most part in peace with one another, in a shared economic growth, and the island became Europe's source for sugar and coffee, and that made it stinking rich, particularly on the French side.
Yeah, so this is true for the French side because they use this to import enslaved people of African descent in mass, right? To be a wealthy colony, right? As it was once called the Pearl of the Antilles. Now, on the opposite end, in Santo Domingo, this was the opposite. Totally different story.
It was this place that made France a global power. But making sugar takes, well, slaves. By 1789, there were about 80,000 white landowners and free mixed people of color, as well.
Now, keep in mind when he's mentioning this, right, by the end of the 16th century in Santo Domingo, the Spanish stopped importing slaves. So, for the most part, during this period, Santo Domingo was in isolation.
Almost 15,000 slaves, but in sharp contrast, on the French side, the slave population had swelled to 500,000, ruled over by a white population that numbered only 32,000.
Right? So in Saint Domingue, 500,000 enslaved people of African descent were imported, majority of whom had a high mortality rate. This is for this reason they kept importing enslaved people of African descent.
Now in Saint Domingue, the slaves were seen as cheap, disposable laborers, and disposed of they were. The treatment of slaves became a virtual, well, holocaust. So with 500,000 slaves and only a handful of captors, well, the place turned into a bomb. What is now known as the Haitian Revolution took about 13 years from start to finish and affected pretty much the entire island in violent episodes of wars and mutual genocides, interrupted by sporadic bouts of peace.
Now, keep in mind, during this period, 1791 through 1804, this reflects the western third of the island, right? Not Santo Domingo. Because remember, Santo Domingo did not have the plantation model, so they weren't having a series of violent revolts like Saint Domingue was.
Main characters were, of course, the rebels on one side and the royalist colonists on the other. But there were supporting characters as well, such as the Dominicans, the Spanish, and even the British, who hoped that in all the mess they might grab a piece of the sugar action. Even the United States meddled a bit, supplying all sides with weapons. History really hasn't changed on that one.
So this is Alex, like kind of meshing things together. This is why, in my opinion, a lot of the Dominicans will have an issue with this because you can't mix the two histories together because it's complex. You have to analyze it and examine it on its own to understand what the differences between the two.
Looking for allies wherever they could, the rebels fought for, well, whatever side was on their side. So at times it was for Spain against France, then with the French against Spain, and then against Napoleon, who basically wanted to conquer all of America. In short, it was a massively violent and, well, very confusing war. In the end, the rebels prevailed, and independence from France was declared in 1804. They had achieved something no slave revolt ever had, completely overwhelming their captors, establishing their own nation, and, well, incidentally thwarting Napoleon's advance into the continent. You're welcome, America. They were free at last. But then, a man named Dessalines declared himself the de facto emperor of Haiti and ordered.
Now, to get into this, right, the massacre, especially the Mocha and burning of Santiago, this was due to his resentment he had of the French, right? So in the latter of the 19th century, right, they had developed a anti-French sentiment. And later, this would be transformed into an anti-foreign sentiment in the beginning of the 20th century to the present.
ordered the genocide of almost all white colonists. He also marched into the Dominican side to chase down a few French stragglers, and on his way, he just raced through several Dominican towns, continuing his genocide. This massacre of French colonists and Dominicans changed the global impression of the Haitian Revolution. Instead of a brave struggle by an oppressed people along the lines of Spartacus, the world saw it as a murderous rampage by a few mad slaves and refused to acknowledge the new nation. Suddenly, everyone feared the slaves, giving new fuel to racism, hate. And this created a global racial hostility, well, that we can still feel today. But what
Now, just to keep in mind, just to go back on the Mocha massacre, now that was documented in the New York Astiaco Herald. But there'll be some people that will try to debate that it was a made-up story. No, it's not made up.
What comes around goes around, and Dessalines was murdered by his own people for being, well, a maniacal tyrant. Inspired by Dessalines' emperor complex, other self-styled emperors and kings began, a game of thrones, vying for power and killing each other and their own, declaring kingdoms and building castles. At one point, Haiti even split into two kingdoms. And all of this took place with the looming threat of a coming winter. Sooner or later, France would.
Yeah, so the split in two was with Alexander Petion and Henry Christophe. So basically, with the mulattoes, and then you had the people of African descent. So it's been a split between those two.
would come back. So in all of this, what about the Dominicans? Well, for the past decade, they had been conquered in no particular order by the Haitians and the English and the Spanish and the French, and with each conqueror bringing death and famine and illness. In 1821, an independence from Spain was declared, and Santo Domingo was renamed to Spanish Haiti. Plans were drafted to join Simon Bolivar and his new nation of Gran Colombia, but that fell through. Suddenly, a peaceful unification with neighboring Haiti looked like a good idea.
Now, when we look at this, during this time, some saw aligning with the Grand Columbia was good, while others saw at the time aligning with Haiti would be good. But this would change soon later after when it would evolve into a military occupation.
After all, by 1822, Haiti seemed rich and powerful and sort of stable now under new administration, this guy called Jean-Pierre Boyer. and Boyer was more than willing to help out the Dominicans, and so he peacefully marched into Spanish Haiti, effectively taking over the entire island. It wasn't exactly an invasion at the time, but it turned out to be one, because Boyer was just another tyrant. In fact, many historians on both sides feel that what was about to happen was the ultimate spark in lighting the Dominican-Haitian conflict as we know it today. You see, what the Dominicans didn't know was that a fleet of French ships had forced Boyer to agree to pay France 150 million francs.
Now, here's the other thing too. This is the second problem that I have with presentations like this. They tend to jump histories. Like, for example, when everything happened between 1821 and 1822, the brief independence that we had, the first one that we have from Spain, right? One of the reasons why Boy was able to take over easily because at that time, Santo Domingo had a lower population density in comparison to Haiti. And also the indemnity, right, that was due to France wanting reparations for the former enslaved people of African descent who became independent in 1804, destroyed the means of production, and massacred or ran out the former French inhabitants.
As war reparations for the revolutions. That's about 20 billion US dollars today. At 10 times the annual national income, there was no way Haiti would be able to pay this. But
Now, also keep in mind, they also made attempts to revamp the French plantation economy, also at the expense of Dominicans, which didn't work. And also, on top of that, they didn't have ways to get the economy going. So at that time, right, the entire island went deep into debt, and this was the fundamental basis for the Spanish side of the island desiring to separate from Haiti.
Boyer agreed because he had an ace up his sleeve. The Dominicans. He had just agreed to pay the French when he marched into Spanish Haiti, intending to use the unexploited riches of the Dominicans to pay France back. And for the next 22 years, he and his military ruled the island with an iron fist, bleeding it dry, even forcing conscripted Dominicans to commit atrocities on their own people.
Now, also keep in mind, in the English-speaking diaspora, it's hardly ever spoken, or at least I have not ever seen, that the Dominican Republic has two historical manifestos that explains the discrepancies of separating from Haiti from the first place, which is due to social and economic reasons.
Resentment that grew within the Dominicans, well, it's never really gone away. By 1838, resistance to the tyranny had grown, and by 1843, Boyer was toppled by a combined Dominican-Haitian rebellion. The Haitian rebels took hold of their side, and the Dominican rebels took control of their side and declared their independence from Haiti in 1844. After so many invasions and oppressions, the Dominicans were free at last. It is no wonder then that the main Dominican Independence Day that is celebrated is the one from this occupation. It was the most costly. Unfortunately, that's not where history ends. Over the next decades, the Dominicans were faced with plenty of other tyrants of their own, and more invasions. Spain tried to conquer back its lost lands.
Now, keep in mind, Spain didn't try to conquer Santo Domingo, right? Santo Domingo, or the Dominican Republic, was reincorporated to Spain. This was due to aggression and invasion attempts.
The US occupied twice, and there were at least 4 more Haitian invasions until 1874 when Haiti finally recognized the Dominican Republic as its own independent nation. And then Rafael Trujillo came along in 1930. Like most tyrants of his time, Stalin, Hitler, he decided to purge all those he seemed unfit to live in his regime.
Now, what he leaves out is first, Trujillo was the result of the instability of the time towards the end of the 19th century, which I covered on my PowerPoint, leading to the first American occupation on the island. Now, Trujillo was like a course corrector, right? And he's responsible for modernizing the Dominican economy. So Trujillo did what he thought was best for his time. The same would be for Pedro Santana, because he thought with the aggression and multiple invasion attempts, the best route would be reincorporating the Spanish territory to Spain. Now, the 1937 massacre could have been something that he had to deal with at the time, because you can say that it was an event that was used to create a basis for anti-Dominican rhetoric all through the present day.
So Trujillo ordered the killing of as many Haitians as possible, the biggest of these purges being the Parsley Massacre. Meanwhile, on the Haitian side, things didn't go so well either. While France reduced the debt of 90 million francs, it took Haiti 120 years, until 1947, to pay it all back, with interest. Haiti then went through a series.
Now, keep in mind, after the French indemnity, right after it was paid off in 1947, from 1947 and forward would be the modern debt that Haiti has today. And that was covered in detail in an article you can get in ResearchGate, Haiti, a political and economy analysis.
Series of good and bad leaders, as well as an occupation by the US, all of which caused only more debts. And to make matters worse, in 1957, one Francois Duvalier and his family came along, who became the worst dictator Haiti had ever seen, and that's saying a lot. Driving Haiti even deeper into debt for his personal gain, he drowned the people in blood and misery, from which they're still trying to recover today. Now, Trujillo died in 1961, and the Duvalier dynasty reigned until 1986. Haiti saw much infighting since then, until the UN intervention in 2004, which ended in 2017. But despite these historic and financial ups and downs, both countries have lived in relative peace for at least 140 years now. But for several hundred years, the Dominican collective psyche was conditioned to expect and repel invasions, mostly from their own neighbor. And while not so much a racial issue at the outset, for many it has become that as well. And that's not to say that with all the back and forth, both nations did not find ways and reasons to coexist and cooperate.
Now, let me piggyback on that because Alex tends to romanticize. As I've stated for some time now, it is much more accurate to state that it is a ethnic conflict rooted in social and economic implications.
17 years after the Dominicans declared their independence from Haiti, Haiti sent reinforcements to help the Dominicans fight their war against Spain.
Uh, that is entirely romanticized. Haiti did not come to help the restorationists. Spain in 1861 sent a letter threatening them not to assist the restorationists, and Jeffrod complied. The only thing that was used was their territory for the Dominican exiles to plan and strategize. That's about it.
During both U.S. occupations in 1916 and 1965, Dominican and Haitian rebels fought in solidarity against the United States.
Now, this is individual for each of their sides, because remember, during the first military occupation, the American military took advantage of the instability of its time. Only difference is two different paths went about. One end, you got Trujillo, right? He modernized the Dominican economy, also brought the DR out of debt due to the series of mistakes that was created, which I covered in my PowerPoint towards the end of the 19th century. right? And then you would get both Duvaliers, who would be responsible for the modern debt that Haiti has today.
And when the earthquake hit Haiti in 2010, Dominican troops were the first to arrive on scene to help. To this,
Now, this is accurate whenever uh, in the present day, since the latter of the 20th century, whenever Haiti has an incident or is in dire need, the Dominican Republic is the first to respond.
day, the Dominican Republic is helping Haiti by providing free education, medical help, and disaster relief. Now, it can be argued that the people in both nations were thrust into this dilemma against their wills, victims of, well, the Game of Thrones of imperialism. On one side are the Dominicans, who originally inhabited the entire island and were then forcefully split up by Spain and France, only to be oppressed. And on the other, slaves, who against their will were forcefully removed from Africa and brought here, only to be oppressed.
Now, I'm going to stop it right there and I'm going to summarize it as this. You have two nations on the island that have entirely different demographic origins, both having social conditions that will forever set the two apart. So this is all for today. For more, you can download my PowerPoint for free, which you can find on my community tab on the Confederation of the Antilles YouTube.